Welcome to the biology class for the IGCSE O levels. So we are going to start with the first topic, which is about the characteristics of living organisms, and then we would follow that up with classification of living organisms. Okay. So for the characteristics, general characteristics of living organism, we use an acronym, Mrs. GREN. Okay. So I have written it here. This is Mrs. GREN, GREN. Now, what does it stand for? Okay, let's talk about that. So the M stands for movement. Okay, let me remove this. Okay, so M stands for the movement. Right. So as you know, organisms can move. They can move their body parts, or they can move entirely, which is also called locomotion, from one position to another position. Okay. So parts of organisms in case of plants, or the organism as a whole. Can move, right? As you know, the animals can do locomotion, right? Locomotion when the whole organism move from one position or one point to another point in space. Whereas in case of plants, they cannot do locomotion, but they can move parts of their body. Okay, they can move leaves, they can move flowers, they can move branches. Okay, so that's possible. But organisms do move. Microscopic organisms like amoeba can move, like paramecium can move with the help of cilia. We will discuss that in detail. But most of the organisms can move, if not entirely, then at least a part of their body. Right. Then comes the respiration. Now, there are different levels of respiration. What we are talking about is the chemical reaction used to break food, okay, which in this case is glucose, usually, to get energy. All right, to get energy for different reactions in the cell called metabolism in the cell, right? All the reactions taking place inside the cell are collectively called metabolism. Now, almost every cell must break down some food particle. It could be carbohydrate like glucose, it could be any type of food, okay, to get energy. Breakdown of glucose is called respiration, right? We will talk about that as well in the future. Then comes the sensitivity, right? So it is the ability of organisms to detect stimuli. What are stimuli? It could be any change in the environment. Change in environment. Singular is called stimulus. So it could be internal environment, it could be a change in the external environment. And to respond to that stimulus appropriately, okay? That is called sensitivity, to detect or to sense the stimuli in the internal or external environment, and then to respond to it appropriately, accordingly. Then growth. Every organism must show some growth. Okay, so it is basically an increase in size of the body as well as the mass of the body. Okay. It could be due to increase in number of cells, or maybe it's a unicellular cell, it's newly made, and that cell increase in size. Okay, so that's growth. Sometimes increase in number of cells, as in case of multicellular organisms, that would be considered growth. Then we have reproduction. All organisms must reproduce. Okay, so the process of making similar organisms. So we will discuss that in detail. The two types of reproduction, sexual and asexual reproduction. Then comes the E for excretion. So if living cells are doing metabolism reactions, then a lot of those reactions must produce some byproducts or some waste products. All right. So removal of those waste products, from the body is called excretion. All right. Usually these waste products are produced as a result of metabolic reactions. Okay. Some substances, there are some substances which are excess in amount inside the body. Okay, or you can say removal of the waste product from the body or excess substances. For example, removal of excess water from the body, in case of humans or other animals, through urine, that would be considered excretion as well. Now, nutrients. Nutrition is the process of obtaining food. Okay, or you can say taking in food, materials for the purpose of growth or to get energy and development. So there is a slight difference between growth and development, right? We will discuss that in the future lessons. All right. For example, for the plants, light, carbon dioxide, water, mineral ions dissolved in the water, absorbed through the roots, all of these are included in the process of nutrition. For the humans, it could be the diet, and that would include food, water. Okay, when they are breathing, taking in oxygen. If you want to, you can include that as well, but usually that's not included in the nutrition. Oxygen is not included in that. Okay, but the food and water is. So that's Mrs. GREN. All the characteristics that an organism must have to be considered a living organism, or any object must have to be considered a living organism. Okay, so that's it. Now the next topic that we want to discuss, right, is about classification. Okay, so let's start with that. So what is classification? The word comes from the word like class. So class is more like a group. Okay, classification of organisms. Let's discuss that. Okay, now we know that there are millions of organisms that have been discovered so far. millions of organisms discovered. Right, about 3 million plus organisms have been discovered so far. Every day a lot of new species of like bacteria, fungi are being discovered, right? So what is a species? Before we go into the classification, let's talk about species. Right, you already know the definition. Let's go over it. Species. So it's a group of similar organisms. Group of similar organisms. Number one, that's the first point. They must be similar. That can interbreed. Must be able to interbreed. Right? And they must be able to produce fertile offsprings. So their offsprings must be fertile. Offsprings means children. Okay, their children must be fertile. Okay. Sometimes what happens is that members of two different species are able to interbreed and produce offsprings, but their offsprings are not fertile. So they are considered different species, right? So the keywords here are the similar organisms, interbreed, produce fertile offsprings. These are the keywords that you need to keep in mind, right? For example, all rabbits in the world belong to the same species. All roses, rose plants belong to the same species. All humans all over the world belong to the same species. They would have these three characteristics, okay? If you want, you can say most of the time, not always, most of the time, all members of a species have same number of chromosomes in all of their cells, okay? In case of humans, if you take the cell of any human from anywhere in the world, it would have 46 chromosomes, okay? You can say that. That's not true for all species, but it is fine, okay? You can consider that, right? Now, these species, these groups are further classified into smaller and larger groups, okay? All these species are classified, or you can say divided into smaller and larger groups. On what basis? Okay, on the basis of their similarities and differences in characteristics, in features. Okay, so please keep that in mind. All right, now that's classification, right? That's classification, like the process of dividing, the process of dividing organisms into groups is called classification. Okay, so keep that in mind. Very easy, nothing too difficult. All right, now along with that we will talk about another topic, a brief one, is binomial nomenclature. Okay, bi means two, nomial means naming, system, or you can say nomenclature, naming system. So it's a process proposed by a scientist called Linnaeus, right? He was basically a Swedish naturalist, right? Carlos Linnaeus. So he proposed it. Basically, he made a very simplified system of naming plants and animals, and that system has been used ever since. Okay, so what is this system, right? What are the rules of this system? He said that every organism must be named, right? Name of organism usually comes from the Latin language. Okay, name of the organism in Latin language, right? Now we have exceptions and all that. It doesn't have to be, but he proposed this, all right? Latin, using binomial system. Okay, so every name consists of two words. What are those words? Okay, the first one is called the generic name, which is basically the name of genus. Okay, what's genus? Is the you can say in the classification system, it's a group of different species which are very closely related to each other. Okay, that's called genus. We will come back to this in a couple of minutes, right? So the genus name is called generic name, and the second one is the specific name. That's the name of the species. Okay, and the generic name starts with capital letter, right? Starts with capital letter. Let me take this down. Okay, starts with capital letter, right? But the specific name or species name is written in small letter or lowercase letter. Okay, all lowercase letters. Okay, another rule he proposed was that to write it in italics. All right, so which indicates that they are Latin. Okay, if you cannot write it in italics, then you can underline it. Okay, so these are the main rules. All right, let's do a couple of examples. Okay, so examples. So these are the common names here. And here you have scientific name or biological name. Okay, so number one, let's talk about humans. We are humans, so I'm a little bit biased. So the scientific name of humans, or just human, is Homo sapiens. Right? Now this sapiens is the specific name, right? So this is the specific name or species name. And this Homo is the generic name, is the name of the genus, right? So just by looking at the name, you can identify the species name and the genus name. I hope that's fine. Okay. Another example. We have let's say meerkat. It's suricata, suricata. So that's it. It's the same name. Sometimes we make it a little bit short, okay? If we have already mentioned the full name previously, you don't need to write the full name again and again and again. You can keep it short like this, right? The first letter, capital of the genus, put a dot, a little bit space, and then the specific name. You can write it like that, okay? Another example is the bacteria which cause cholera. Cholera bacterium is called Vibrio cholerae. Okay, so in that way we have a lot of different examples. Okay, so yeah, as we go along we might come across a bunch of other examples as well, right? So any other example we have, let's say rose plant. That's like Rosa indica. Okay, so yeah, that's how you can write the scientific name of different organisms. Now let's talk about the different groups we have from larger to smaller groups. Okay, this is basically the Linnaeus system. Okay, according to his system, but it has been revised many times after that. Okay, so the major groups are K, P, C, O, F, G, and S, right? So K is for the kingdom. Then we have phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Okay, so here we have larger group, right? Larger kingdom is much larger group, and general group. So all the organism in one kingdom, let's say in kingdom Animalia, all the animals would be included. So they are generally related to each other. Okay, they will share general characteristics. As you go down, the groups get smaller and smaller, and it becomes more specific. Smaller plus specific group. Okay, so a kingdom would have a bunch of phyla. Each phyla would have a bunch of classes. Each class would have a bunch of orders. Each order would have a bunch of family. Each family would have a bunch of genera, which is the plural of genus. And each genus would have a bunch of species. Not necessarily, but that's usually how it works. Let's consider an example. Okay, for the humans, the kingdom is kingdom Animalia, or animal kingdom. The phylum is Chordata. Okay, these are the organisms which you can say would have later on would evolve or would develop spinal cord. Okay, Class Mammalia, they have mammary glands. Order Primates. Family Hominidae. Genus, as we already know, Homo, and species is sapiens. Okay. So the full name would be Homo sapiens. Okay, but we usually call it Homo sapiens, like this. All right. That's the scientific name. So you have to consider that. For plants, the kingdom would be Plantae and onward, right? So there are a bunch of different acronyms you can use for it. Okay, like King Philip came over for Grand's spaghetti. You can like develop a bunch of different acronyms, but it's easier to just follow it like that. All right. Now, how do we classify the are there other ways to classify organisms? Okay. So classification in the old time was done on the basis of apparent physical features, similarities, and differences. Okay, in the old time, it was done on the basis of similarities and differences in features. Okay. It could also be done on the basis of type of cells, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, with nucleus and without nucleus. We will discuss that later. But now in the modern era, we usually do classification using biochemistry. Classification using biochemistry. How do we do that? We use biomolecules, right? We compare biomolecules. Usually, those biomolecules are DNA or maybe RNA or protein sequences. Okay, how does that work, right? If let's say we compare the DNA, we extracted the DNA of two organisms and compared it. So the DNA of two closely related organisms should be or you can say must have DNA similarities. Highly similar. Highly similar in sequence. So DNA is made up of smaller units called nucleotides, right? So if we have two organisms, let's say we compare DNA of humans with any other primate. Let's say we compare the DNA of human with the chimpanzees, right? So the DNA of these two species should be very much similar in sequence of the nucleotides. Okay, the similarities show that these organisms are closely related, or you can say it reflects their evolutionary relationship. if we have the DNA of two organisms which are distantly related or which are not that closely related at all, then their DNA would have more differences rather than similarities. Okay, so that's what you need to keep in mind, right? Obviously, if you want to compare the DNA sequences, we need to extract the DNA from the cells of those organisms and then compare it. Okay, these sequences nowadays are already available on the internet, so we can get these sequences from there and easily compare them using computer softwares and tools. Okay, we might discuss that in the future. Now, yeah, so that's it. Similar techniques can also be used. Similarly, the amino acid sequence which make proteins. So all proteins are made up of chains of amino acids, right? So amino acid sequence of proteins can be compared as well, right? For example, let's talk about example. So in case of humans, the blood has red blood cells, right? And in the red blood cell, there's a protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin protein in red blood cells, RBCs, red blood cells, okay, of human have 574 amino acids. Sum total, there are like 4 chains in the hemoglobin protein, and the total number of amino acids are 574. Okay. Now, out of those 574, if we compare it with the hemoglobin, right? The hemoglobin, HB dot means hemoglobin of, let's say, gorilla, would share or would have 572 amino acids in common with hemoglobin of humans. So out of 574 amino acids in the hemoglobin of human, only 2 differs from the hemoglobin of gorilla. So that's how we can compare the proteins or the amino acid sequence of the proteins from different species and try to find out which organisms are closely related in the evolutionary history and which organisms are distantly related. Okay, so to summarize this whole topic, this is not over. Okay, and next we would go into the features of the organisms. And before that, there's another topic, dichotomous keys. We will do that in the next video. All right. So far, what we have discussed is that the characteristics of living organisms and then binomial system developed by Linnaeus, that each organism is named from the Latin language with 2 words. First word is the name of the genus, second word belongs to the species, and the classification can be done on the basis of similarities and differences of features. Now we do classification on the basis of biomolecules. We compare the sequences of biomolecules like DNA, RNA, or proteins. Right? So I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section. Share it with any students who can benefit from it, and let me know which topic you want me to cover. Okay, thank you, take care.